This is from Tenet Media. Nick Fuentes and Jake Shields walk into Turning Point's People's Convention and are almost immediately removed by security. So I don't know the reason. I don't think they know the reason. The guy who walks up to Fuentes and Shields says he knows why he's banned from here. And Nick then responds, because of Israel. And I think I think this is a big problem for Turning Point in not, I don't know if they've issued a formal statement or what, but I do think there should be a reason why Nick Fuentes and Jake Shields, I believe primarily Nick Fuentes, was removed from their conference. This video, it's just from today, earlier at the Turning Point. I think it was in Detroit. They're doing a great event. Happy to see it. But for what reason was Nick turned away?
Isn't he like a leftist socialist kind of guy? Nick?
Fuentes?
Yeah.
National socialist.
Yeah, he's like a socialist, isn't he?
He's a national socialist.
Is he a socialist?
I don't think that's like a conference for like right-wing people. So it makes sense.
If you listen to
they have leftist journalists that are allowed in there. And if they don't want Nick there, that's absolutely fine. But if they don't give a reason, then Nick decides what the reason is. And Nick's decided the reason was his criticism of Israel.
Well, that's Nick's reason for everything. He stubs his toe. He's like, Israel did.
And great. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But Turning Point should say, here's the reason why we don't allow Nick Fuentes in. And maybe they did. I don't know. I just didn't see it.
I don't know. But I mean, I'm pretty sure that he does believe in like a big, strong central government. So he may be conservative, but it's a conservative government with big, strong. So it's not like
if his
typical.
people wanted to win, he would do it. Tim said, you do type 2 colonization. You go, you take your people, you take over a place. That's what Free Staters do in New Hampshire. We've moved in. You take over, you colonize it. If Christians want a nation, they should take over their best state. They should target it. They should all move there, and they should enact their government.
Well, a lot of people have pointed out Iceland is an overwhelmingly white country with eugenics policy. And so...
And rare earth minerals, I think.
Yeah.
Geothermal heating,
and the geothermals actually increase their standard of living dramatically. And so there have been white nationalists who have proposed people need to... Their proposal is that if you're a white nationalist, keep it to yourself, emigrate to Iceland however you can, bring as many people as you can, and take over the small nation. And here's the reality. They don't want to do that. Just like socialists, they're like, nah, I want your stuff.
Exactly.
I don't want to have to go and make my own thing. I want your thing.
There's
like, okay, well, dude.
And I think that's a big problem with all this stuff is it's very difficult to have a Fuentes-like narrative that doesn't also involve everyone on your side being a retard. Like your conspiracy theory is that everyone on my side is constantly tricked, and it's not possible for them to not get tricked. Like, I just don't get it. You know,
it has to be.
Like I'm very mad that I can't do math. You know, like their complaints are just all involve them being dumb. So it's like you want to build a society where it's only for dumb people.
But like you're saying the argument that they're having is that Israel has outsmarted them at every step of the way.
I mean, the Jews are so smart that I can't even convince my fellow white Christians who still make up the predominant portion of America to just not get tricked by Jews. Christians are his implicit in his theory is that Christians are too dumb to not get tricked by Jews. Therefore, Jews can't be near Christians.
That's literally what he's saying. That's right. They're like,
sure. If that is what he believes.
Because it starts as a cheat code because, you know, they believe that white people are a whole lot smarter than non-white people. That's what they believe ideologically.
Well, not necessarily. They actually just believe in racial heavy correlation between race and IQ, and they do believe that there are some non-whites that are smarter than.
Yes, on an individual basis, but not on a group basis.
No, they actually will outright say Asians are smarter than them.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair, but they won't say that about blacks, or they won't say that about Hispanics.
Right.
Well, because they're not.
So how do you then explain why you are politically losing to people who you regard as inferior? Jews are who you then bring in as the explanation.
Real quick, this is why I refer to Fuentes and them as it's a form of wokeness that they're concerned about Jewish privilege. Mm-hmm. Right. The arguments that they make about Israel. You can take all of the arguments they make about Jews and replace the word Jew with white person, and you get the woke woke ideology.
He sounds like Malma talking about the Boer in South Africa. Is actually how you seriously like they sound. If you listen to some of those South African people talking about like why are the Boer so good at running the power plants, you know they sound exactly like Nick Fuentes complaining about journalists.
The joke I used to make is take any one of these arguments and replace. You have Jews, you have white people, you have the 1%, you have the bankers. You can figure out which faction you belong to by ascribing all of the conspiracy theories to a select group of people, because that's what everybody does. Mm-hmm. You had during Occupy Wall Street the 1%. Now, the 1% of it's the rich people that start all the wars. It's the rich people that are stealing our wealth. The rich people, a very generic, vague thing to say. Then you get the anti-Semitic groups that are saying like it's the Jews that run all the banks. It's the Jews that start all the wars. And then you can take that. Then it's the white people. Now all of a sudden, then it's the cis heteronormative white males. Whatever group you hate, you assign to whatever bad thing is happening, and there's your conspiracy theory.
Well, the most appealing political narrative is one that justifies me hurting other people and taking their stuff.
Yeah.
Right. This is what every political narrative is selling some justification that we need to help these people, hurt these other people, and so who helps and who gets hurt, and so this is an appealing political narrative. To go and take stuff from wealthy people or people who have it's so appealing. We want these theories to be true. Of course, it's appealing to that billionaires are all evil. The idea that billionaires are better than the average person and mostly earn it through merit, that's not a comfortable fact. I want to believe that they cheated me somehow. I want to believe that they got one over on me, and therefore I can go and take their things. It's much more appealing. All of my psychology is primed to want to believe that.
And this is the narrative of so many revolutions. So many genocides, blaming a group for all of your problems.
Yeah. Which is why, as a libertarian, I believe that the government is the fault of all of their problems, and we need to take the government stuff. So I want to be clear: this is a good strategy. It works, and I am using it.
The government stuff is your stuff.
Well, right. I mean, think about it. If the government owns an incredible amount of land, we should take it and distribute it to the people, right? The government is taking an incredible amount of money. We got to take. They're controlling all this wealth and all this economy. We got to take it back.
I got an idea.
Let's take it from them.
Let me. I want to ask what you think. How about all of the land that is controlled by the federal government in the West Coast and the Rockies, like how they have just control over all of it? What if we divide up 40 acres each and a mule and pay the reparations to the descendants of slaves through seizing federally held lands and distributing it to private individuals?
Sure, we all, what you expect would happen, would happen. When lottery winners win $1 million, where are they 10 years later?
Well, that's changed, actually.
People who don't have anything generally don't have anything as a result of their choices. If you give them a bunch of things, they'll just end up with nothing again.
But yes, but I don't know if I care because I'm like...
Sure.
We've had this argument about...
Oh, yeah, shut them up. Sure, yeah. But they wouldn't shut up. They just ask for more. So
I don't care if they ask for more. Or taking the land from the government and stripping the power from the land they've seized. So, we've had a lot of arguments about reparations. It's a bad idea. I certainly think the general idea that they proposed, like, how about scholarships? How about community centers? How about tax? And I'm like, dude, growing up in racially segregated areas... I tell you how bad it will be. It will be nightmarish if you implement direct reparations policy that either is cash supplemental, or community specific in cities. That being said, if the reparations plan was we're going to seize all of the Bureau of Land Management's land and then distribute it among private citizens who are descendants of slaves, that's just taking away from the government, and I don't care what happens after the fact.
Do they get the land or do they get the value of the land?
The land. The land is... The federal government has seized effectively a bunch of land in the United States. They just declared ownership under the Bureau of Land Management. And I'm like, nah, how about this? And we had one guy on the Culture War who was like a woke lefty guy. And I was like, perhaps here's the agreement, the compromise. The government has basically seized this land from the people. We don't really have an effective means of just restoring that to private ownership. But if we play the reparations angle, we get a 50-50. It does kind of suck that we have this race-based payout system, but it is just seizing the land back from the federal government into the hands of private citizens, which in the end can find its way into the market and then find its value. I don't know. I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah, but this idea that if you just give people assets, that they won't be poor again. I mean,
I'm not saying that.
Sure.
I literally don't.
Okay,
they can go live in the mountain with the mule and then run out of food and go back to the city for all I care. But the government has lost control of the land they seized.
Gotcha.
So it's like whatever.
Sure. Yeah. I get it. I'm with you now.
And what'll happen? But you know what'll happen? Yeah. They will go to someone and they'll say, you know what? We told you all hundreds of years ago. We told your ancestors that there would be 40 acres and a mule. You are getting it. And then what do? They'll sell it. So all that would really happen is land would open up for sale at a competitive market rate because there would be so much of it. It actually wouldn't be too expensive. And then you'd see the private market come in and say, we will now buy this from all of you. I'm not saying that it'll be good in terms of what happens to the people who sell the land after the fact. It just strips the asset away from the federal government and puts it in the private market.
It probably would help someone. It may not help the actual initial beneficiaries, the initial recipients, but the process of selling all that land might actually help someone.
It'll help BlackRock.
You could just sell the land directly, though, and use that to pay down the debt, or use
that would be nice.
Pay down the debt.
Well, all right.
Jeez, that's crazy talk.
Do something. I don't know.
No,
I'm sorry.
know.
I didn't mean
I'm
to bring
not-
prudence. I'm sorry. There's no place for prudence in America.
I'm not saying it's the absolute solution. I just like as an idea that was presented. Yeah. It's like, would you weigh the wokeness of the race-based policy versus the stripping the government of resources? It's like
libertarians are the most oppressed class in America is something I say a lot, because we're the ones who actually view the government as illegitimate. You guys view it as legitimate, so you deserve it. We don't deserve it. So we, I think, are the ones who really deserve the reparations. I think if we can get lumped in with the blacks, I'm in. Okay, libertarians and blacks get reparations, and then this is a deal. I'll cut a deal with you right now.
My attitude is just like, if you strip 100, 200, 400 billion dollars from the federal government in their land holdings and deliver it to the private market to be utilized in some way, I'm kind of like, I got a high threshold for what I would be willing to accept in that. Like, I don't see a detriment to myself where I am, the work I'm doing, or anybody else by giving, mostly barren Rocky Mountain territories to various people to figure out what they want to do with.
Oh, we combine this with Vivek's plan for firing administrators. So all of the administrators, the 2/3 that get fired, they get the federal land as like their severance package.
Well, actually, okay. My idea was instead of firing everybody, you just relocate the entirety of the FBI to like the Rockies, just in the mountains somewhere, and just we'll invest in building a mountainside hovel, and that's where you work from now on. And they're going to be like, we quit. It's like,
Their office
oh
is
no.
a cave.
That's right.
At the bottom of some mountain.
Like we're quitting. We don't want to work here anymore. Oh no, don't quit. Oh, I guess they're gone. There you go. That's how you do it. Because the argument was it's really difficult to fire federal bureaucrats and employees. And it's like, well, come on, anybody who knows anything about running a company, you don't just fire them. You just make a job that nobody wants to work.
That they'll quietly quit.
Yeah, there you go. I first said put them in Alaska, because then what we have is federal investment into building a city in the middle of Alaska. But then the Alaskans got mad and they were like, you're going to ruin our state. And I'm like, oh, well, that's true.
A question, kind of a wider question based on what we were talking about Nick Fuentes earlier. Like, do you guys think that there's ever a situation where you can blame a group of people and they really are that group of people, whether it's a class of people, I don't know how you would group these people together. A race of people, a language-speaking group of people,
the answer
a
is
family, a government.
Yes. The answer is yes, but it's small scale, not large scale. Like, I don't think it's fair to blame America for what our oligarchic military-industrial complex machine is doing against our wishes that we desperately fight every day. You can pass some of the blame to some of these people who are passively voting and supporting, corruption. But I would say the active political class in the United States, left or right, are very much opposed to all of this war and conquest. And then they say, America's doing this, America's doing that. It's like, hey, guys, the people who follow politics back home in the United States are opposed to all of that. We don't want it. And then there's a warmonger class that just operates off of special interest. That being said, if there was a group of 6 people that called themselves the Cabal and they were ultra wealthy and they were enacting a plan to like rob a bank, you can blame the group for the robbing of that bank.
Yeah, it must be historically that is the case, that it has happened where like that family is the root of all of our problems collectively. Let's go take out that family. And then they did, and the solution was oriented. And then after the removal of the threat, whether it was external governance, a family, a religious sect, a cultural sect, I mean, it's sad and terrifying to think that you would target a race of people and that would be the end of your problems.
Like, a race doesn't make sense. Ethnic groups don't make sense.
On its head, it doesn't make sense.
Well, but when we say groups, we don't mean a group of 6 people, right? But we mean...
That's why I'm getting into the semantics of it. Like, the argument of a generic group, you can only blame a group when you're talking about, like, an ideological faction. So the answer is yes. If there's a group of 100 people that have formed a faction called like Antifa, yes, you can blame Antifa. They operate in cells. They support each other. There's not that many of them. There's several thousand. They share an ideology. They share tactics. They communicate with each other. They fund each other, and they engage in violence. So if a group of people in Black Bloc show up and start smashing things, I say it's fair to blame Antifa, but that's an ideological faction.
It's also individual people. It's not like you're blaming the grandchildren of Antifa members or the great-grandchildren of them for the windows that were smashed before they were even born. So that's what happens with a lot of when you do it over religion, race, ethnicity. You're often blaming people who weren't even alive whenever the original sin was committed.
So I think, as someone who talks about groups sometimes, I think the question is, how you're doing it and what you mean by it. Like because there are 8 billion people in the world. You're going to have to be able to categorize them in some way. So even statements like men are stronger than women is obviously a group-based statement. That statement is generally not heard as all men are stronger than all women. It's a statement about a general statistical truth. And so when do you want to cut off the ability to make claims like that? And so to me, I think it is okay to make group-based statements that are true the vast majority of time or true in general, to be able to talk about averages, if you're reading these group-based statements as on average, rather than all. When we talk about groups, do you mean on average or all? And this is unclear when we talk about groups. But if you're going to talk about groups, you need to make sure that you're saying, I'm saying this as an average thing, as something that's true in general, not something that's always true. And that's where group-based thinking gets dangerous, is when you say it's always true. So I'll give you, I'm Jewish. There's a lot of talk about, I'm half Jewish anyway. There's a lot of talking about Jewish responsibility for various things. I have no problem acknowledging that Jews are more progressive on average, right, than other groups of people. And so therefore, if an area is more disproportionately Jewish on average, it's likely to be more progressive. If you're going to say, well, therefore, just because Jews are more progressive on average, no Jews can be in my conservative coalition, or no Jews can, that's where, and so it's fine to make the statement, Jews are more progressive, if you're saying on average. If you're using that to say, and therefore I can't work with Jews, that's the problem. And so that's how do you mean your group statements is very important.
And there's the what are you going to do about it question.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're just making a factual observation about something that might be true on average, men are stronger than women, for example. Okay, men are stronger than women, therefore to make women safe, we need to lock all men in cages. Well, that's kind of a problem, right? And so what you're going to do about it matters a lot too.
It's important when you make claims about groups that people know you're talking about averages. It's like an annoying thing to have to add on to it. On average, when I say that they're taller than the other group, on average, but because as soon as you say they are taller than them, you're assuming it assumes all.
It's an IQ test. And I can't remember who brought this up. It might have been Michael Malice or whatever.
Fortune post.
If I have to, if you respond to my statement, when I say men are stronger than women, if you respond with not all, I immediately know I'm talking to a moron.
Yep.
There's actually a really funny bell curve meme. You know the bell curve meme where there's a really dumb guy, the average guy, and then the smart guy? The meme was something like the dumb guy and the smart guy both talk in as simple terms as possible, and the midwit and the average guy try to sound as intelligent as possible. So it's
the midwit's well, not all, you mean on average is the midwit, but the dumb guy's yeah, they are all taller, stronger than the others.
Not all, but
yeah, they are stronger
the
than the
dumb guy
others.
goes, men are stronger than women. And the smart guy goes, this is correct, men are stronger than women.
And the smart guy's picturing...
Goes, actually, on average, is around a 20% increase. It's nobody needs that context.
Well, the idiots need it.
No, they don't.
They think when they hear men are stronger than women, they think all men are stronger than all women.
You see, you're pulling a midwit on me.
No, that's what the idiot thinks. That's why the midwit says it, is so just for the idiots listening.
No.
Yeah, he's trying to translate.
That's not the point I'm making.
I think it is.
No. The point is...
Let me tell you what you're thinking, Tim.
Lower IQ people can speak in simple terms to get the gist of it. It's communicating through memes. The smart people know you don't need to elaborate what is common sense. The midwits try to over-explain because they think they're smarter than everybody.
Well, I think they think they're smarter than the idiots. And maybe they think they're smarter than the smart people,
they're
too.
smarter than
Because
everybody.
if Jeremy says men are stronger than women, and then some idiot, low IQ, is yeah, and pictures all men now stronger than all women, then the midwit comes in and is well, actually, he's not being very specific. It's on average. The smart guy already knew what he was saying.
Ian's proving my point.
The dumb guy misinterpreted what the smart guy was saying.
Ian, I think you've literally just proved my point.
So I think it's actually kind of a...
Well, not all midwits. I just want to point out that not all midwits make a mistake.
That's a good hashtag, not all midwits.
I would rather go towards the trend that groups, when we talk about groups, that on average is the default context. I think it's easier because otherwise it's really hard to use group-based labels. And so I actually think we've gotten too defensive. We've gotten so concerned about racism. We've gotten so concerned about bigotry that we're now afraid to make statements that are true because we're so worried about these claims being meant as all and going in these places we do have dark aspects of human history. So I'm not saying there's no reason to be concerned, but if we're stopping our ability to talk about truths, if we can't talk about group differences, and then we go, well, gosh, there sure does seem to be some racism in police violence, or there sure does seem to be some racism in who's getting certain jobs, or there seems to be sexism in who becomes a Fortune 500 CEO, and we can't explain why because we've tabooed all discussion of group differences. Like, this is a real problem. So there have been negative outcomes with good intentions. We've maybe tabooed some group-based discussion, but it's had some really negative outcomes because we can't explain important truths about the world.
Yeah, I think what they call race realism. I love the idea that you would just be genetically accurate. All you're doing is taking someone, talking about their genetics, and then making accurate claims about that. Not about grouping them in with other people with similar genetic.
What do you mean?
Like, some genetics lead to certain height differentials, perhaps, and that derives from your ancestry, which maybe came from one area of the world where they needed to be taller to get along. Stuff like that. And so you could say, like, that person's bone structure has this quality, or tends to have.
Talking about phrenology?
Might be part of it.
There's a meme where it shows two skeletons in an X-ray kissing, and then some leftist captioned, like, this is so beautiful because right now you can't tell if it's a man or a woman or a black person or a white person. And then someone responded with, actually, we can. Based on the mandibular blah, 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 and the forehead pronunciation, this appears to be a person from this region, and it's a male and a female. And I think the conclusion was, based off the skull alone, they could tell it was a white man and an Asian woman.
So, like, in video games, if you have like one race, there's like the big rock man and he can live in fire, you put him in the fire room because he can survive in that environment. So in reality, if you've got a white dude and a black dude and an Asian dude, what environments do they thrive in on average?
None of them will live in a fire room.
None of them have to live in a fire room. There's no big rock men in this reality. But, like, that conversation is okay to have without a racist bone in your body, like just genetic observations. How are we different? Let's talk about it.
You understand that most of the time, accusations of racism are less about what you're saying and more about a vector of attack. Right? Nowadays, most of the time when people accuse someone of racism or whatever, it's not that they have a problem with talking about racial differences or whatever, because you can see it when if it's a person that's a progressive, you can see that progressives are completely comfortable with racism because they're racist against white people, right? So it's not that the problem is racism. It's that calling someone racist is a vector of attack. There are always going to be people that are going to be racist and have racist ideas or racially biased ideas. And you can have those without having malice towards the groups you're talking about. But when people are going to accuse you of racism because you're saying things, it's not that they have a problem with what you say so much as they want to use that as a vector of attack to shut you down.
That anecdotally functions with what my experience is. Yeah,
I think the issue with race realists is that they take it too far. They make assumptions about individuals based on it's not necessarily that
biological essentialism.
They believe that race is the most pressing factor in an individual's development, and I think genetics certainly plays a role in development, but nature and nurture probably have some kind of back and forth depending on the individual. So I remember in Berkeley arguing with race realists, and their argument was, like, the race of the person is indicative of their genetics, and their genetics determine everything. And I'm like, yeah, that's not true. If you take a South Korean child, and on average South Koreans have higher IQs, and you leave him in the woods and only occasionally drop off just raw food for him to eat, no education, no access to math, by the age of 15, he will be completely incapable of learning language. We've seen this already. It doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your genetics. With a lack of neural development, muscular development, this person as an adult will not be able to develop those things later on. So, when these people argue about the race and the IQ, and I'm like, environmental factors can override almost all of that. And that's the issue with making presumptions about race and genetics.
Negatively, but not positively. It's easy to come up with negative interventions, as you say, and race is clearly not deterministic. But if there were positive interventions that could could cause racial outcomes in the United States to be equivalent. This is $1 billion industry that people have been looking for 50 years or 80 years or 100
elaborate
years.
an example.
We know that the whatever you want to estimate the mean IQ difference between various races or ethnicities to be, it's clearly there. It's in the SAT data. It's in the GRE data. It's in every standardized test data that's ever been taken. It's in every IQ test data. It replicates itself in every country. It's like one of the most well-replicated facts.
So the problem from there is they then say, Harvard, for instance, we're going to now do admittance based on race. And the reason why that's so extremely racist is that you'll end up with an Asian kid from the Bronx or something, low-income family, and they're going to say, you look too much like those people, so you can't go to Harvard now. A chance for someone who is poor, of an individual circumstance, to move up in their life. I'm not saying you should go to Harvard, to be honest, but the general idea is there, based on group race policies. This is what happens. The left looks at the schools and says, there's too many Asians, too many whites, not enough blacks, not enough Latinos. Start kicking Asian people out. And I'm like, why is, little Jimmy from the Bronx being denied access to higher education based on his race? It doesn't solve the process of the problem of racism. It is literally them exacerbating racism, because their argument is they don't like the fact that too many Asians score well on tests and get into these schools. I don't care who gets in the schools. Take the test, get in the school, do whatever you want. I don't think it's racist to have an outcome where you have predominantly Asian and white people.
And it creates more racism. Like you guys been covering this story out of UCLA with all this malpractice around how people have been admitted. You're going to have outcomes. You're not going to have situations where people have been gaming things to let people that are underqualified and not as able in on the basis of their race. And what are you supposed to do on the other side of that? How do those people end up getting if you don't want racism, you need strict meritocratic tests. If you're creating different standards for different races, then the rational thing for people on the other side of that is to say, oh, you're a race that got preferential bonuses to get into college. Well, then I can't judge your college degree as an employer as equally worthy. I have to now you can of course go. I'm not saying you discredit them, go deeper, assess them more seriously. But if a college is clearly lowering its standards on the basis of race, then the degree can't be, worth the same.
It does that, and it also creates resentment among the people who don't get in because they're held to a different standard.
Yeah. And it creates, actually, because I saw some in my school, you also have people who are struggling, and it also can create racial resentment on that axis. So you have, if it ends up being that you are boosting races to get into college, and then they get into the college and they're in the bottom 20% of whereas they could have been in the middle or at the top somewhere else
at a different college.
Yeah, and that this also, so that it's
setting them up for academic failure.
Yeah, the idea that people that getting into the wrong school makes it more likely that they're going to fail is obviously not a positive for for the people that are actually getting it.
Well, and then they see that they fail, and they're like, well, we better get rid of the grades, or what they were doing in UCLA, like letting people just through to like medical school that couldn't pass tests, and they're giving them degrees.
It's the first I heard. What's the U.S.
There's a big scandal. There's a guy on Twitter covering it, like Aaron Silberbot. He broke the story. These professors leaked all this internal data about the racial admission standards and the outcomes of the students. And the professors tried to have an internal investigation, and they could not get a promise from the school that there would not be a retaliation against any individuals who acted. So this whistleblower went to a journalist with all of the data, and it's pretty damning what UCLA has been doing, like letting basically unqualified people into the school in the first place, and then gaming the system to give them, to basically be like either giving them degrees or letting them through, just completely unqualified, just so that they could have racial equality in students. It's crazy.
They used to do it with athletes.
Either
it was kind of like just accepted. They would push athletes through the curriculum just because they needed a powerhouse front lineman.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe, and we'll see you all there.